I lived my life like a ceiling fan, always running and always needed but never actually heard. That changed the day I spoke one single sentence at a family dinner, and the whole room froze like someone had cut the audio. From that moment, they did not just want my money, they wanted my identity. The scariest part was discovering they had been using my name for a long time. This story begins with a familiar silence. My name is Everly Hayes, and for most of my life, I have existed in the periphery. I am 33 years old, and if you asked my family to describe me, they would likely pause, frown slightly as if trying to recall a dream from 2 nights ago, and eventually settle on a word like reliable or perhaps quiet. They would not say these words with malice. That is the important part to understand. There is no villain in the opening act of my life, no wicked stepmother locking me in an attic, no father who berates me over breakfast. There is only the soft, suffocating blanket of indifference. I am the background noise of the Hayes family, the low hum of a refrigerator that you only notice when it suddenly stops working. My sister, Delaney, is the melody. She is 2 years younger than me, but she has always taken up twice the space. Delaney is the kind of woman whom sunlight seems to find intentionally. When she walks into a room, the energy shifts. She has a laugh that sounds like champagne glasses clinking, and she has built a life that looks immaculate on Instagram. She is a marketing consultant, or a brand ambassador, or something that involves wearing beige trench coats and holding lattes while looking effortlessly happy. People gravitate toward her. They want to know what she is wearing, who she is dating, and what she thinks about the weather. When Delaney speaks, people lean in. When I speak, people check their watches. I learned to navigate this dynamic early on. I stopped trying to compete for airtime at the dinner table when I was 12 years old. I realized that my stories about science fairs or books were simply commercial breaks waiting to be interrupted by Delaney's drama with the cheerleading squad. It was not that they told me to shut up, it was just that their eyes would glaze over, and my mother, Marla, would start clearing the plates before I had finished my sentence. So, I learned to be concise, then I learned to be silent, and finally, I learned to be invisible. This invisibility served me well in my career. Oddly enough, I work as a senior systems architect for Vantrelis Cyberworks. It is a fictional name to you, but in my world, it is the iron gate standing between global corporations and total digital annihilation. My job is heavy. It is 12-hour shifts of staring at cascading lines of code, hunting for anomalies that are smaller than a grain of sand but capable of bringing down a banking system. It is a career built on paranoia and precision. At Vantrelis, I am respected. I am the person they call at 3 a.m. when a server farm in blisters goes dark. I manage teams. I authorize budgets that could buy my parents' house 3 times over, and I hold secrets that could ruin stock markets. To my family, however, I am just the girl who knows how to fix the printer. Whenever the topic of my career comes up at family gatherings, my father, Grant, waves a hand dismissively and says, "Everly does something with computers." He says it with the same tone one might use to describe a teenager playing video games in a basement. They do not know that last year I prevented a ransomware attack that would have compromised the medical records of 4 million people. They do not know that I was promoted 3 times in 5 years. They do not know because they never asked. And I stopped offering the information a decade ago. It is safer this way. If they do not know what I do, they cannot minimize it, and more importantly, they cannot ask for favors beyond the mundane. I moved to Seattle 4 years ago. It was a strategic retreat. I told them I needed to be closer to the tech hub, which was true. But the deeper truth was that I needed to be geographically distant from the feeling of being a ghost in my own home. Seattle suits me. It is gray and rainy, a city that respects introspection. I bought a townhouse in a neighborhood that smells of salt water and pine needles. It is not a small apartment, as I let my mother believe. It is a 3-story sanctuary with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sound. I have a custom kitchen I rarely cook in and a master bathroom with heated floors. I make a significant amount of money. I do not say this to brag. But to state a fact that is relevant to the architecture of my silence, my base salary is nearly $250,000 a year. Not including stock options and bonuses, I could fly first class. I could buy my mother the luxury car she hints about constantly. I could pay off Delaney's credit card debt, which I know hovers around $15,000 because she leaves her statements on the counter when I visit. But I do not. I live well below my means when anyone is watching. I drive a reliable, 4-year-old sedan. I wear clothes that are clean and high quality, but lack visible logos. I have curated an image of just getting by because I know that in my family, money is not a resource to be shared. It is a currency of control. If they knew what I had, the dynamic would shift from indifference to exploitation, and I am not sure which one I fear more. The incident that solidified my resolve. The moment I realized that my role was not just a habit, but a life sentence, happened last Thanksgiving. I had flown home to Port Helmsley, taking the red-eye flight to save time. Though I told them it was to save money, I arrived exhausted, my eyes burning from the dry cabin air. The house was already in chaos. My mother was stressing over the turkey. My father was yelling at the football game on the television, and Delaney was nowhere to be seen. She arrived 2 hours late, breezing through the front door with a store-bought pumpkin pie and a new boyfriend named Travis or Trevor. I can never remember. The greeting for Delaney was a parade. My mother wiped her hands on her apron and rushed to hug her. My father actually stood up from his recliner. "Look at you. You look stunning." "Lainey," my mother cried, touching Delaney's hair. "Is this the new coat you told me about?" "It is gorgeous." I was standing in the hallway, holding my luggage, having been there for 10 minutes without anyone offering to take my coat. I smiled. A reflex muscle memory. "Hello," I said. "Oh. Ev. You are here," my mother said, looking over Delaney's shoulder. "Be a dear and check the thermostat, will you?" "It feels freezing in here." That was my welcome. A chore. I adjusted the thermostat. I peeled the potatoes because my mother said her arthritis was acting up. I set the table. I listened to Trevor or Travis talk about his startup idea for 45 minutes, nodding politely while my brain solved a complex encryption key I had been struggling with at work. I was present, physically, but I was functioning like a utility. I was the electricity keeping the lights on, not a guest at the party. Then, the internet went down. It was a catastrophe of epic proportions. The football game was streaming, and the signal cut out right in the fourth quarter. At the same time, Delaney was trying to show everyone a slideshow of her recent trip to Cabo on the smart TV, and the music streaming to the Bluetooth speakers died. The house plunged into a sudden, awkward audio silence. "Everly." My father shouted, not asking, but commanding. "The thing is doing it again. Fix it." I did not sigh. I did not complain. I simply set down my glass of wine, which I had barely touched, and walked over to the entertainment center. The router was shoved behind a massive oak cabinet, tangled in a rat king of dust bunnies and coaxial cables. I had to get on my hands and knees. I crawled behind the television, the smell of old electronics and dust filling my nose. It was dark and cramped. I had to use the flashlight on my phone to see the blinking orange light that indicated a connection failure. While I was back there, squeezed between the wall and the heavy furniture, I heard the conversation continue in the living room. The silence had only lasted a moment before they filled it with chatter, unconcerned that I was crawling on the floor in my good slacks. "So, how was the flight?" "Lainey," my aunt asked. "Oh, it was fine," Delaney said, her voice bright. "But honestly, the seats are getting smaller," I told Mom. "Next time I am just going to splurge on business class. I work too hard to be cramped." "Good for you." "Honey," my mother said, "you deserve it. You work so hard." I gritted my teeth. I was currently holding 2 dusty cables, rebooting the modem for the 3rd time. My knees were hurting against the hardwood floor. I worked 60-hour weeks. I managed the security protocols for Fortune 500 companies. Delaney worked part-time as a social media coordinator for a boutique that sold overpriced candles. I finally got the sequence right. The lights on the router turned steady green. The television flickered back to life, the roar of the football crowd filling the room. The music resumed. There my father cheered, clapping his hands. Touchdown. He was cheering for the game, not for me. I shimmied backward out from behind the cabinet, brushing gray balls of dust off my black trousers. My hair was static charged and sticking to my face. I stood up, expecting someone to say thank you, just a simple acknowledgement that I had restored their entertainment. But they were gone, not literally gone, but their attention had shifted entirely. My father was glued to the screen. My mother and aunt were gathered around Delaney, who was opening a gift box my parents had apparently been saving for this moment. It was a designer handbag, a small leather thing that likely cost $600. "Oh my God," Delaney squealed, holding it up. "Mom. Dad. You shouldn't have. It is beautiful." "We just wanted you to have something special," my mother said, beaming. "We know you have been wanting it." I stood there, wiping grime from my hands onto a tissue I found in my pocket. I had bought my own plane ticket. I had paid for my own ride from the airport. I had fixed their internet. And for my birthday 2 months prior, I had received a card with a $20 gift certificate to a coffee chain I did not even like. It was not about the bag. I could buy 10 of those bags right now without checking my bank balance. It was not about the money. It was about the visibility. Delaney was a person to be celebrated. I was a mechanism to be utilized. I walked to the kitchen to wash my hands. The water was cold. I looked at my reflection in the window above the sink. It was dark outside, so the glass just showed me my own face pale, composed, with a smear of dust on my cheek. I looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind of tired that comes from holding up a heavy ceiling for 30 years while everyone else dances on the floor below. I scrubbed the dirt off my skin. I dried my hands on a paper towel because the decorative towel was for display only. I could hear them laughing in the other room. Delaney was recounting a story about a waiter who had spilled a drink on her, and everyone was hanging on her every word. I thought about walking out there and screaming. I thought about shouting, "I make more money than all of you combined. I own a house you can only dream of. I am important." But I did not. The training was too deep. The groove in my brain was worn too smooth. Instead, I straightened my blouse, fixed my hair, and walked back into the living room. I sat on the edge of the sofa, just outside the circle of light cast by the floor lamp. "Did you fix it?" my father asked without looking away from the game. "Yes," I said softly. "It is working now." "Good," he said. That was it. I sat there for the rest of the evening, sipping my warm wine, watching my sister shine. I told myself that I did not need their applause. I told myself that I was above this need for validation. I told myself, it is okay. I do not need the spotlight. I am an adult. I am independent. But as I looked around the room at my mother pouring more wine for Delaney, at my father cheering for a team he did not really care about, at my aunt laughing at a joke she did not hear, I felt a cold realization settle in my chest like a stone. I was telling myself I did not need it because I knew I would never get it. I was rationalizing my own neglect. I was participating in my own erasure, by staying silent, by fixing the Wi-Fi and fading into the wallpaper. I was teaching them exactly how to treat me. I was efficient, low maintenance, and utterly forgettable. I looked at Delaney, glowing and golden, and then I looked at my own hands resting in my lap. They were clean now, but I could still feel the phantom sensation of the dust. I was not hated. I knew that. Hate requires passion. Hate requires energy. You have to think about someone to hate them. My situation was far more permanent and far more devastating. I was not hated. I just was not counted. The drive to the Port Helmsley Coastal Club was a short one, but it felt like crossing a border between two warring nations. It was my grandmother, Opal Wynn's 80th birthday, and in the hierarchy of family obligations, this was non-negotiable. Opal was the matriarch in the truest sense of the word. She was sharp, unsentimental, and possessed a gaze that could strip the varnish off a lie from across the room. She was the only person in the family I respected, mostly because she was the only one who never pretended to be anything other than exactly who she was. I had flown in that morning, taking a car service from the airport instead of asking my father for a ride. I told myself it was for convenience, but really, it was because I needed the mental preparation time. I needed to assemble my armor. For this occasion, I had chosen my outfit with the precision of a military tactician. In the past, I would have worn something safe, something from a department store clearance rack that allowed me to blend into the beige walls of the banquet hall. Today, I wore a charcoal silk blazer tailored to within a millimeter of my life, paired with trousers that draped with the heavy, liquid weight of expensive fabric. I wore no jewelry except for a vintage watch I had bought myself at auction, a piece that cost more than my father's entire golf club membership. I did not look flashy. I looked like competence. I looked like someone who signed checks rather than waited for them. When I walked into the private dining room, the air was already thick with the sound of my family celebrating themselves. The room was all glass and white linen, overlooking the marina where boats bobbed in the rhythm of the tide. The sunlight was harsh, bouncing off the water and illuminating every pore, every flaw. My mother, Marla, was the first to see me. She was adjusting the floral centerpiece, fussing with a lily that refused to stand straight. She looked up, her smile practiced and ready, but it faltered for a fraction of a second when her eyes landed on me. It was a look I had analyzed 1,000 times in therapy. It was recognition, yes, but layered with confusion. She looked at me the way one looks at a stranger who resembles someone they used to know. It was a painful, hollow sort of confusion, as if my sudden crispness did not compute with her internal file on Everly the Invisible. "Everly, you made it," she said, coming over to offer a cheek for me to kiss. The air around her smelled of heavy floral perfume and hairspray. She pulled back and ran her eyes over my blazer. "You look different. Is that wool? You must be sweltering." "It is silk blend," I said, my voice steady, "and the air conditioning is quite strong." She blinked, not knowing what to do with a daughter who did not immediately apologize for her choices. "Well, go say hello to your grandmother. She has been asking about you." I moved through the room. My father was at the bar, laughing loudly at a joke told by my Uncle Jerry. Delaney was, predictably, the center of gravity near the patio doors. She was wearing a dress that matched the ocean, holding a flute of sparkling water with a slice of lime, looking every bit the protagonist of this reality show. She waved at me, a flutter of fingers, before turning back to the 3 cousins who were listening to her explain the difficulties of finding a good esthetician. I found Opal sitting at the head of the long table, watching the room like a hawk surveying a field of mice. She looked frail physically, her skin like crumpled parchment paper, but her eyes were clear and terrifyingly alert. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I said, taking her hand. It felt like a bundle of dry twigs. She squeezed my fingers with surprising strength. "Everly, you are late." "I am exactly on time," I corrected gently. "The invitation said 6 o'clock. It is 6 o'clock." She hummed, a sound that could have been approval or dismissal. "You look sharp, better than the last time I saw you. You looked like a wet cat last Thanksgiving." I smiled. "Thank you. I think. Sit next to me," she commanded. This was the first disruption of the natural order. Usually, the seats next to Opal were reserved for Marla and Delaney. I was typically relegated to the far end of the table, near the kitchen doors, where I could be asked to run errands or grab extra napkins without disrupting the flow of conversation. But when Opal Wynne gave an order, nobody argued. I sat. The rest of the family filed in, and I saw the flicker of annoyance on Delaney's face when she realized she had been bumped down a seat. She recovered quickly, flashing a dazzling smile as she took the chair opposite me. "So, Ev," Delaney said, her voice projecting to the entire table. "Mom said you are still doing the computer thing. Are you, fixing laptops? Now?" I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. "I am a systems architect." "Delaney, I work in cybersecurity." "Right. Cybersecurity? she said, rolling her eyes playfully at our cousin Mark. That sounds so intense. I could never sit in front of a screen all day. I need people energy. I took a sip of water. I did not explain that my screen time protected the infrastructure of the very banking apps she used to buy her shoes. I let the comment slide. It was bait, and I was not hungry. The appetizers arrived, and the conversation turned to the usual topics: the cost of real estate, the neighbors who were renovating their pool, and whose children were getting married. My father, Grant, launched into a monologue about the housing market in Port Helmsley. You cannot touch a decent property for under $800,000 these days, he complained, stabbing a shrimp with his fork. It is criminal. We were lucky we bought when we did. I worry about you girls. Delaney, how is the apartment hunting going? Delaney sighed dramatically. It is a nightmare. Dad, everything is so small and expensive. I need natural light for my content creation, and these landlords want a fortune for a closet. I might just have to stay with you and Mom a little longer. Of course, sweetheart, Marla said immediately. We love having you. Take your time. We want you to find the perfect place. Then, Opal turned her head slowly and looked at me. And what about you? Everly, she asked. Her voice cut through the ambient chatter. Where are you living now? Still in that rainy city. The table went quiet. It was rare for the spotlight to swing my way. And usually, when it did, it was brief and utilitarian. Marla answered before I could open my mouth. It was a reflex for her. She answered for me because she assumed my answer would be boring, or embarrassing, or simply not worth the wait. Oh, Everly is in Seattle. Mom, Marla said, waving her hand dismissively. She is renting a little apartment there near her work. You know how expensive the city is. She is just keeping it simple. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest. The assumption of my mediocrity was so ingrained in them that they created the narrative before I could even live it. A little apartment. Keeping it simple. They needed me to be small so Delaney could be big. It was the physics of our family universe. But today, the silk blazer felt like armor. Today, I had $250,000 in liquid cash in a high-yield savings account and a portfolio worth double that. Today, I was tired of the script. Actually, I said, the word hung in the air. I did not raise my voice, but the tone was different. It was the tone I used in boardrooms when a vendor tried to oversell a flawed product. Marla looked at me, blinking. What I am not renting. I said calmly. I turned to look directly at Opal. I bought a place about 2 years ago. Marla laughed. A nervous, trilling sound. Oh, honey, you mean a condo? Like a studio? That is great. Good for you. No, Mother, I said. I picked up my wine glass and swirled the liquid. Watching the red legs run down the side. It is a townhouse in West Seattle. 3 stories. It overlooks the Sound. The silence that followed was not the comfortable silence of people eating. It was the stunned silence of a glitch in the matrix. Forks paused halfway to mouths. My father lowered his drink. Delaney, who had been taking a sip of water, suddenly choked. She coughed violently, slamming her glass down, water sloshing onto the white tablecloth. Are you okay? Someone asked her. But nobody looked away from me. You bought a townhouse? My father asked, his brow furrowed. In Seattle. Do you have any idea what the property taxes are out there? How on earth did you afford a down payment? I put 20% down. I said, keeping my voice mild, as if discussing the weather. It has a private garage and access to a community dock. I have been thinking about getting a boat. Actually, but I do not have the time to maintain it. I watched the information hit them like a physical wave. I saw my father doing mental math, calculating the price per square foot in a major metropolitan area. I saw my mother's eyes widen, her mind racing to reconcile the daughter she thought she knew, the one who needed to save money on plane tickets, with the woman sitting before her who owned prime real estate. Delaney wiped her mouth with a napkin. Her face flushed. She looked at me with something that was not happiness. It was betrayal. I had broken the rule. I was supposed to be the struggler. I was supposed to be the backdrop. A dock, Delaney repeated, her voice tight. You have a dock shared. I clarified. "But it is nice for kayaking." A heavy silence descended again. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. For 33 years, I had been the ceiling fan functional, invisible, background noise. Now, I was the unpredictable element. I had secrets, and in a family that traded on status, secrets were currency. Suddenly, the energy at the table pivoted. It was nauseatingly swift. Uncle Jerry, who had not spoken a direct sentence to me in 5 years, leaned forward. His face, previously bored, was now animated with a greedy sort of curiosity. "West Seattle. You say, that is an up-and-coming area." Jerry said, "Smart investment. Very smart. You know, I have been reading about that tech sector boom. You must be doing well at that company. What was it called again? Ventrellis Cyberworks?" I said, Right. He nodded vigorously. "I have heard of them. Big contracts. You must have some serious stock options." I took a bite of my salmon. It was dry, but I chewed it slowly. "I do okay." My father cleared his throat. He looked at me with a sudden, intense scrutiny. He looked like he was seeing a stranger who had walked into his house and sat in his daughter's chair. "Why did you not tell us?" he asked. It sounded like an accusation. I looked him in the eye. "You never asked." "Dad, you usually ask if I am still single or if I can fix the Wi-Fi. You never asked about my assets." Marla let out a breathy, uncomfortable laugh. "Well, aren't we full of surprises tonight? That is wonderful. Everly, just wonderful. We are so proud." She said the words, but the tone was off. It lacked warmth. It was the tone of someone who realizes they have underestimated an opponent. She reached out and patted my hand, but her touch was brief, retreating quickly as if my skin was too hot to handle. For the rest of the dinner, the dynamic was unrecognizable. The questions came in a barrage. "How is the market doing? What do you think about crypto? Is it safe to do online banking? Do you have a guest room?" They asked me about interest rates. They asked me about security protocols. They asked me things they would ask a consultant, not a family member. Delaney sat silently for the most part, picking at her salad, her eyes darting toward me every few minutes with a mixture of calculation and fear. She was realizing that her monopoly on success was being challenged, and she did not have a strategy for this. I answered their questions politely. I gave them advice on two-factor authentication. I nodded when my father talked about his portfolio. I was the center of attention. I was being listened to. For the first time in my life, when I spoke, nobody interrupted me. The room was tuned to my frequency. But as I sat there, bathed in the sudden, bright light of their interest, I felt a profound chill settle in my bones. I looked at their faces. They were not looking at me with love. They were looking at me with hunger. They were looking at me and seeing a resource they had left untapped. They were recalculating my value, shifting me from the liability column to the asset column in the mental ledger of the family business. I looked at Opal. She was eating her cake, a small smile playing on her lips. She had known. She had thrown the match into the powder keg just to see what would happen. I took a sip of wine. It tasted bitter. I had wanted this for so long, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be respected. But now that I had it, it felt nothing like I had imagined. I thought it would feel like a warm embrace, a homecoming. Instead, it felt like standing under a harsh interrogation lamp. It felt clinical. It felt dangerous. I realized then, with a clarity that cut deeper than any insult they had ever hurled at me, that this was not affection. This was assessment. Being seen does not mean being loved. It just means you are now a target. The change in the atmosphere was not subtle. It did not arrive like a gentle shifting of the seasons, turning from the cold of winter to the thaw of spring. It arrived like a carnival coming to town, loud, bright, and demanding my immediate attention. In the days following my grandmother's birthday dinner, my phone, which usually served as a silent brick of glass and metal used strictly for work emails and two-factor authentication codes, began to vibrate with a frequency that alarmed me. It was Delaney, for the past 5 years. My text history with my sister had been a barren wasteland of birthday emojis and the occasional question about what to get Mom for Christmas. Now, my screen was a waterfall of blue bubbles. There were exclamation marks. There were hearts. There were animated gifs of cats hugging. Hey, are you still in town? We have to grab coffee before you fly back. I feel like we never talk. OMG. I just saw this sweater and thought of you. Miss you. Let's do brunch. It was love bombing. I knew the term. In cybersecurity, we call it social engineering, overwhelming a target with rapport to lower their defenses. I knew the theory, I knew the mechanics, but knowing how a magician saws a woman in half does not stop you from holding your breath when the blade comes down. I was starved for this. I was so thirsty for connection that even this artificial rain felt like salvation. I agreed to meet her for coffee the morning before my flight back to Seattle. We met at a place called The Roasted Bean, a trendy spot in downtown Port Helmsley, where the exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs were designed to justify charging $7 for a cup of bean water. Delaney was already there when I arrived. She stood up and waved, a gesture so enthusiastic it drew stares from the other patrons. She hugged me a real hug, tight and lingering, smelling of vanilla and expensive conditioning treatments. I am so glad you came, she said, pulling out a chair for me. I feel like I barely got to see you at the party. Everyone was swarming you. You are like a celebrity now. I sat down, keeping my purse close to my body. It was just a dinner. Delaney. No, it was a reveal. She insisted, her eyes wide, serious boss energy. Ev, I had no idea you were doing so well. I mean, Mom and Dad always made it sound like you were struggling. I ordered a black coffee. Delaney ordered something complicated involving oat milk, lavender syrup, and 3 pumps of vanilla. We made small talk for 10 minutes. She asked about Seattle. She asked about my house. She asked if I had a view of the Space Needle. It was pleasant. It was the kind of sisterly dynamic I had watched in movies and wondered if I would ever replicate. Then, the pivot happened. It was executed with the grace of a ballerina. Delaney sighed, her shoulders slumping dramatically as she stirred her drink. I love that you have your own place, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am honestly so jealous, not in a bad way. Just, things are so hard right now. Hard how I asked. Taking the bait because I wanted to be the supportive sister. Everything. She said, my rent went up by $200 this month. $200? And my car needs new brakes, and the boutique cut my hours because retail is dying. And honestly, I am just drowning. Ev, I look at my bank account and I just want to cry. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. It was a compelling performance. I felt a twinge of genuine sympathy. I remembered what it was like to be 20-something and broke. Though my version of broke involved eating instant noodles in a dark apartment, not complaining about it over $7 lattes, then she dropped the sentence that would ring in my ears for months. You are so lucky. Everly, she said, shaking her head. You do not have to worry about money. You have it all figured out. It must be so nice to just breathe. Lucky. I had spent 4 years in university studying while she went to parties. I had spent 10 years working 80-hour weeks, missing holidays, ruining my eyesight, and sacrificing my social life to build a career in a high-stress industry. I had saved, invested, and lived like a monk while she bought designer handbags and went to Cabo. But she did not see the work. She only saw the result, to her. My stability was a stroke of luck, a winning lottery ticket I had stumbled upon, rather than a fortress I had built brick by bloody brick. I should have corrected her. I should have said, it is not luck, it is discipline. But I looked at her face. I saw the way she was leaning toward me, treating me like a confidant, like an equal. If I corrected her, the moment would shatter. The warmth would evaporate. I guess I am fortunate, I said softly. The bill came. Delaney reached for her purse, but she did it with the slowness of someone hoping to be stopped. She fumbled with the zipper. She checked her phone. I got it, I said, placing my card on the tray. Are you sure she asked? Her hands freezing instantly. You do not have to. It is fine, I said. My treat. She beamed. The relief on her face was instantaneous. You are the best. Ev, seriously. Thank you. It was a small transaction, $20, but it felt like a key turning in a lock. The next day, I flew back to Seattle. The distance usually provided clarity, but this time, the digital tether remained. 2 days later, my father called. Grant Hayes did not call me unless someone had died or the Wi-Fi password had changed. Seeing his name on my caller ID made my pulse spike. Everly, he said, his voice gruff but lacking its usual dismissive edge. You back in the rain? Yes. Dad, I said, sitting at my desk, looking out at the gray skyline. I am back at work. Is everything okay? Oh, you know, he said, exhaling a long, weary breath. Same old, same old. Your mother is fine. I am hanging in there. What is wrong? I asked. He hesitated. It was a well-rehearsed hesitation. It is this damn insurance. Ev, I went to the specialist for that knee trouble I told you about, or maybe I did not tell you. I do not want to bore you with old man problems. Anyway, the copay is through the roof, and there is this gap in the coverage for the physical therapy. I waited. It is just frustrating. He continued. I worked my whole life, and now I have to dip into the rainy day fund just to walk without limping. It is about $4,000 out of pocket. We have it. Of course, we can pull it from the retirement savings, but there are penalties. And, well, it is just a headache. $4,000. To me, that was a number in a spreadsheet. To him, it was a hurdle. And then, the thought came. The seductive, dangerous thought. I can fix this. I could be the hero. I could be the dutiful daughter. I could be the one he thanked. Dad, I said, my voice steady. Don't touch the retirement fund. I can cover it. There was a silence on the other end. A stunned, heavy silence. Ev, no, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. That is too much. I was not asking for that. I know you were not. I lied. But I want to. It is for your health. I will transfer it today. He let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Honey, I do not know what to say. That is incredibly generous. You are a lifesaver. You really are. Lifesaver. The word tasted sweet. It tasted like acceptance. I transferred the money within the hour. The notification from my bank app popped up, transfer complete, $4,000. It felt like buying a ticket. Then came my mother. Marla did not call. She was more visual. She began sending me photos on WhatsApp, photos of kitchen cabinets, photos of hardwood flooring samples, photos of marble countertops. Look at this, she wrote. Your father and I have been dreaming of redoing the kitchen for 10 years. But have you seen the prices of lumber lately? It is criminal. I guess the old linoleum will have to last another decade. She included a sad face emoji. I looked at the photos. I looked at my own kitchen. With its quartz island and Viking range, guilt is a powerful architect. It can build a prison out of nothing. I texted back, how much is the lumber? Oh, for the whole project. The contractor quoted us $12,000. She replied instantly, but that is just a pipe dream. $12,000. It was a significant sum, but I had just received a quarterly bonus of $25,000. I can help. I typed, call it an early anniversary gift. The response was a string of heart emojis and crying faces. Everly, you are an angel. We do not deserve you. I sent the money, and then the ultimate reward arrived. I was sitting on my couch, watching the rain streak against the glass. When my phone buzzed, a notification appeared. Delaney added you to Hayes Fam Bam 2.0. I stared at the screen, the family group chat, the inner sanctum. For years, I knew this group existed. I had heard them reference it. Did you see the meme Dad posted? Did you see the video Mom sent? I had never been in it. I was the outlier. Now, I was in. Welcome to the chaos. Big Sis Delaney typed. Glad to have you here. Honey, Mom added. Welcome aboard. Dad wrote. I scrolled up. I could not see the history, of course, but the new messages began to flow. They shared jokes. They shared complaints about the neighbors. They shared photos of their dinners. And every few days, they shared a need. Car is making a weird noise again. Delaney would post, followed by a sad selfie. Heating bill was double this month, Dad would grumble. Just saw the cutest dress for the gala, but I will just wear my old black one. Mom would sigh, and each time I would step in. Not always with the full amount, but with enough. I sent $500 for the car repair. I sent $300 for the heating bill. I sent a gift card for the dress. With every transfer, the praise washed over me. Best sister ever. Thank you. Sweetie, you are the rock of this family. Ev. I was no longer the background noise. I was the main event. I was the patron saint of the Hayes family lifestyle. I knew, deep down in the analytical part of my brain, the part that hunted for logic bombs and Trojan horses, that this was transactional. I knew that if the money stopped, the messages would stop. I knew that I was purchasing their affection at a premium market rate. But the emotional part of me, the part that had sat in the dark fixing the Wi-Fi while they opened presents, did not care. I told myself, maybe they have changed. Maybe this is just how families help each other. Maybe they finally see me. It was a flimsy defense, a cardboard shield against a steel arrow. But I held it up anyway. I was not stupid. I knew exactly what was happening. I was simply willing to pay the price. I sat there one evening, the blue light of the television flickering in my empty living room, and looked at my bank statement. The list of outgoing transfers was a column of red numbers. Transfer to Delaney Hayes, $800. Transfer to Grant Hayes, $4,000. Transfer to Marla Hayes, $12,000. I ran my finger over the screen. I did not see loss. I did not see exploitation. I saw tuition. I saw dues. I saw the cost of admission to a club I had wanted to join since I was 5 years old. I looked at the group chat, buzzing with activity. My name finally included in the roster of participants. I am in. I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the transfer notification like it was a ticket, stamped and verified, allowing me to finally belong. The phone rang at 11:14 at night. In my line of work, a late-night call usually signifies a disaster. It means a firewall has been breached, a server has overheated, or a hacker has found a backdoor into a database that holds the social security numbers of half the population. My body reacted before my mind did. My pulse spiked, and my hand shot out to the nightstand to grab the device, my brain already cycling through emergency protocols. But it was not work. The screen glowed with a name that I rarely saw displayed there. Grandma Opal. I sat up, the duvet falling to my waist. The silence of my townhouse was absolute, save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the rhythmic patter of Seattle rain against the glass. Opal never called this late. Opal rarely called at all, preferring to write letters in her sharp, angular cursive because she claimed cell phones made her ears hot. I answered, my voice thick with sleep and sudden worry. Grandma, is everything all right? There was a pause on the other end. It was not the silence of a dropped call. It was the hesitation of someone holding a heavy object, deciding where to set it down so it would not break the floor. Everly, she said. Her voice sounded older than I remembered. It was thin, lacking its usual crisp authority. It sounded like dry leaves scraping together. I am here, I said, sitting up straighter, switching on the bedside lamp. The sudden light made me squint. What happened? Did you fall? Do I need to call the neighbors? No, she said. I am fine. Physically, I am fine. She took a breath. I could hear the static of the line, a low hiss that felt like the distance between Port Helmsley and Seattle stretching out over miles of dark highway. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to just listen. Do not interrupt me. Do not ask me questions until I am done. Can you do that? Yes, I said. The dread in my stomach shifted. It was not the panic of a medical emergency anymore. It was something colder. It was the intuition I relied on when I scanned code for malware. Something was wrong with the system. I was at your parents' house today. She began. They had a barbecue. Just a small thing. The neighbors. A few of Grant's golf buddies. Delaney was there. I felt a pang of exclusion. Sharp and familiar. But I shoved it down. I was the one who lived away. I could not expect to be invited to a Tuesday evening barbecue. I stayed late. Opal continued. I was waiting for my ride. Mrs. Gable from down the street was supposed to pick me up, but she was running behind. Your mother thought I was in the guest room napping. I was not. I was sitting in the sunroom, reading. The door to the patio was open. The screen was drawn, so they could not see me, but I could hear them. They were sitting out by the fire pit. I waited. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. They were talking about the kitchen renovation. Opal said. Her voice was steady now, stripped of emotion, reporting facts like a court stenographer. Marla was showing off the new catalog for the cabinets. She was so excited about the marble island. I closed my eyes. I had paid for that excitement. I had bought that joy. Your father was laughing, Opal said. He was drinking that expensive scotch he likes. He said, and I want you to hear this exactly as he said it, he said. I never thought the day would come when that girl would actually be useful. The air in my bedroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Useful. Not kind. Not generous. Not successful. Useful. Like a tool. Like a wrench you keep in the garage until the pipes burst. Marla laughed with him. Opal went on. She said, I know. It is about time she paid us back for raising her. God knows she was a drain on us for long enough with all that tuition. I stared at the wall. I had paid my own tuition. I had worked 3 jobs in college. I had taken out loans that took me 5 years to pay off. They had contributed exactly $0 to my education. But history, I was learning, was written by the people who spoke the loudest. But that is not why I called. Opal said. Her voice dropped lower. It became softer. And in that softness, there was a terrible pity that hurt more than the anger. Delaney was there. I held my breath. My sister, my new best friend, the person who sent me cat memes and heart emojis, the person I had just transferred $800 to for car repairs. Delaney was agreeing with them. Opal said, she told them they should upgrade the stove to the professional grade 1 because you would not notice the difference in price. She said you have more money than sense. I felt a physical blow to my chest, a hollow thump like a bird hitting a window. And then, Opal said, slowing down, enunciating every syllable. She said this, it is actually kind of sad. She thinks we care. She is so desperate for it. She is so easy to manipulate. I just send a text with a few exclamation points, and she opens her wallet like she is paying for a therapy session. The silence that followed was deafening. It was not a ringing in my ears. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of the world stopping. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something inside me quietly disconnect. It was the sensation of a breaker flipping. One moment, there was power, there was heat, there was light, there was the humming energy of hope. And then, click, darkness. Everly Opal whispered, I am here, I said. My voice sounded strange. It was calm. It was terrifyingly calm. It did not sound like my voice. It sounded like the automated voice of a GPS navigation system. I wanted you to know, Opal said. I debated it. I thought maybe I should let you have your fantasy. But I raised you better than to be a fool. And I will not watch them pick the meat off your bones while you thank them for the privilege. Thank you, Grandma. I said, Are you okay? She asked. I am fine. I said, Do not do anything rash, she warned. Do not call them screaming. That gives them the power. That makes you the crazy one. I am not going to call them. I said, Good, she said. She sounded relieved, but also weary. I am going to bed. Everly, I love you. You are the only one of them worth a damn. I love you too. Opal. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed it gently on the nightstand. I did not throw it. I did not sweep the lamp off the table in a fit of rage. I did not scream into my pillow. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the Puget Sound. The glass was cold against my forehead. Outside, the city was a blur of gray and black, the lights of the ferries moving slowly across the water like distant stars. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman in silk pajamas. I saw a woman who managed billion-dollar security infrastructures. I saw a woman who had spent 33 years trying to solve the puzzle of her own family, trying to find the missing variable that would make the equation balance. I realize now that the equation was unsolvable. It was not a puzzle. It was a con. She is so easy to manipulate. The words did not burn. They froze. They settled in the center of my chest like jagged shards of ice. I thought about the text messages. The miss you, the you are the best. I thought about the warmth I had felt reading them. The pathetic, eager warmth of a dog that has been kicked so many times it wags its tail when the boot merely nudges it. I had known. That was the worst part. Somewhere, deep in the binary code of my survival instinct, I had known. I had known that love did not appear overnight. I had known that people do not change their fundamental nature because of a single dinner conversation. I had known that the sudden interest in my life was directly correlated to the revelation of my bank account, but I had chosen to ignore the data. I had chosen to override the security warnings because I wanted the connection so badly. I had paid for the lie because the lie felt better than the truth. But the truth was here now, standing in the room with me. It was naked and ugly, and it held a knife. I never thought the day would come when that girl would actually be useful. Useful. I turned away from the window. I walked into my bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my eyes in the mirror. They were dry. There were no tears. I waited for them, but they did not come. The sadness was too deep for crying. Crying is a release. Crying implies that there is a wound that can be healed. This was not a wound. This was an amputation. They had cut me off. They had severed the last tether of genuine feeling I had for them. They had taken my hope, which was the only thing keeping me attached to the Hayes family name, and they had laughed at it over barbecue and scotch. I walked back into the bedroom. I picked up my phone. There was a text from Delaney, sent 20 minutes ago. Hey sis, thinking about you. Also, random question, but do you think you could help with Mom's dental bill? It is super high and she is stressing out. Love you. I stared at the words, love you. It looked different now. It did not look like affection. It looked like a command code. It looked like the input required to generate an output of cash. I did not reply. I sat down in the chair in the corner of my room. I did not sleep. I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain, feeling the cold clarify my mind. If I confronted them now, they would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would say Opal was old and senile, that she misheard, that I was being sensitive. They would spin the narrative until I was the villain, the paranoid daughter who attacked her loving family. No. Confrontation was sloppy. Confrontation was emotional. I was a systems architect. When we found an intruder in the system, we did not immediately shut down the server. That would alert the hacker that they had been detected. It would cause them to scrub their tracks and vanish. Instead, we watched. We monitored. We let them think they were still undetected. We tracked their keystrokes. We mapped their network. We gathered evidence. We waited until we knew exactly how deep the infection went, and then, only then, did we execute the purge. I looked at the notification from Delaney again. I was not going to block them. Not yet. I was not going to scream. I unlocked my phone. I opened the Notes app. I created a new folder. I named it Project Silence. I kept the smile on my face, a ghost of the expression I used to wear to please them. But in my head, I began to write the plan. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. We look for faces in clouds, rhythm in noise, and affection in abuse. For 33 years, my pattern recognition software had been glitching, interpreting exploitation as connection. Now, With the patch installed by Grandma Opal, the system was running clean. I began the experiment on a Tuesday. In scientific terms, every experiment requires a control group and a variable. The control group was my behavior. I would remain polite, responsive, and seemingly engaged. I would answer their calls. I would reply to their texts with appropriate emojis. I would ask about their days. I would be the dutiful daughter and sister they thought they had domesticated. The variable was the money. I turned off the tap. It started subtly. Delaney's request for help with Mom's dental bill, the one that had arrived the night of Opal's call, sat in my inbox, unread for 12 hours. When I finally replied, I did not attach a Venmo confirmation. That sounds stressful. I wrote, I hope she feels better soon. Have you checked if her insurance covers part of the procedure? The response was delayed. When it came, it was curt. Yeah, checked. It does not cover much. She's pretty worried about it. I typed back, I am sure she will figure it out. She is resourceful. I hit send and waited. I watched the 3 little dots appear, disappear, and appear again. Delaney was typing, deleting, and retyping. She was recalibrating. The ATM had accepted her card but dispensed no cash. She was trying to figure out if the machine was broken or if she had entered the wrong PIN. Yeah, she finally wrote, Anyway, talk later. Phase 1 complete. Over the next 3 weeks, the dynamic shifted with the grinding friction of a rusty gear. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a frantic, escalating urgency to reinstate the financial flow. It was fascinating, in a morbid way, to watch them work. They were not subtle. They were like amateur con artists who had forgotten their script. My mother, Marla, was the most transparent. She sent me a photo of a quote for a new roof. It was formatted as a PDF screenshot, the total circling $18,000 in bold red ink. Can you believe this price, she texted? The contractor says if we do not fix it before winter, we might get leaks in the attic. Your father is losing sleep over it. In the past, my response would have been, send me the invoice number. I will take care of it. This time, I wrote, that is steep. Maybe you should get a second opinion. I can look up some other contractors in the area for you if you want. Radio silence for 4 hours. Then, we really liked this guy. He is available next week. We were hoping to just get it done. The implication was a sledgehammer pay for it, so we can stop thinking about it, I replied. Good luck with the negotiation. Let me know who you pick. I did not offer a cent. My father, Grant, took a different approach. He called me on a Sunday afternoon. He sounded jovial, the kind of forced cheerfulness that sales calls use. Hey, kiddo, how is the big city? Making those big bucks, he laughed, a sound that grated against my ear like sandpaper. Work is fine. Dad, I said, typing on my laptop while I spoke. How are you? Hanging in there. Just watched Tom and Linda, The Millers post photos from their cruise to the Mediterranean. Must be nice. Huh? Retired at 60 and seeing the world. That sounds lovely. I said, yeah. Well, Grant sighed heavily. Some people get the breaks. I was telling your mother. It would be nice to take a trip like that. Just once before we kick the bucket. But with the cost of living, well, maybe in the next life. He paused. He left a gap in the conversation wide enough for me to drive a check through. He was waiting for me to say, Dad, book the cruise. I will pay for it. I let the silence stretch. I let it become uncomfortable. I listened to his breathing on the other end. Retirement is expensive, I agreed cheerfully. But you guys have a nice backyard. It is almost like a resort in the summer. Another pause. Longer this time. Colder. Yeah, sure, a resort, he muttered. Well, I have to go. Game is coming on. He hung up without saying goodbye. The messages in the group chat. Hayes fam bam. 2.0 began to change frequency. The funny memes stopped. The good morning texts vanished. The updates on their lives became sporadic. Without the dopamine hit of a transfer notification, I was no longer interesting to them. I was no longer a protagonist in their story. I was a malfunctioning appliance. Delaney's strategy shifted from affection to guilt. She stopped sending me photos of her outfits and started sending me photos of bills. Internet bill is due, and I am literally at zero. She posted, "I guess I will just have to go to the library to work this week." I replied, "Libraries are great for focusing. I used to study there all the time." She did not like that message. She did not heart it. By the fourth week, my phone was almost silent. The notifications that had flooded my screen a month ago had trickled to a halt. I checked the logs. The drop-off in communication correlated exactly 100% with the cessation of funds. It was a perfect, heartbreaking graph. I sat in my office at Ventrellis, looking at the data visualization I had mentally constructed. It was irrefutable proof. They did not miss Everly. They missed the wallet. They missed the convenience. When the vending machine stopped dispensing candy, they stopped kicking it and simply walked away. It hurt. I will not pretend it did not. There is a specific kind of agony in realizing that your absence is less noticeable than the absence of your money. I felt a phantom limb sensation, the ache of a connection that had never really been there. I grieved for the sister I thought I had reconnected with. I grieved for the parents I wanted to please. But grief, when processed through the filter of betrayal, hardens into resolve. Then, the invitation came. It was mid-November. The holidays were approaching. My phone buzzed with a text from Marla. "Hi, honey. We were talking, and we really want you home for the holidays this year. The big annual party. We missed having the whole family together properly. It just isn't the same without you. Please say you will come. We want the family to be whole. Whole." I stared at the word. It was a strategic choice. They were not asking for me because they missed my jokes or my company. They were asking because the revenue stream had dried up, and they needed to perform a hard reset. They needed me in the room to re-establish the control mechanism. It is harder to say no to someone's face. It is harder to refuse a check when your mother is crying over a burnt roast and your sister is hugging you. They were calling me in for maintenance. I should have said no. Every instinct in my body screamed to stay in Seattle, to lock the doors, to spend Christmas with a bottle of wine and the view of the gray ocean. But I needed to finish it. I needed to see them one last time. I needed to look them in the eyes, not through a screen, not through a text message, and see the transaction happening in real time. I needed to witness the mask slip when they realized the ATM was permanently out of order. And I had Opal. I had an ally on the inside. I typed my reply. "I would love to come. I will be there." "Yay," Marla replied instantly. "Can't wait. It will be magical." I put the phone down. Magical. Yes, it would be magical. Like a disappearing act. I booked my flight. Economy class. I did not need to impress them anymore. I packed my bag. This time, I did not pack the expensive gifts I usually brought. I did not pack the checkbook. I packed my black dress. I packed my recording device, a small, professional-grade dictaphone I used for meetings. I packed the cold, hard realization that I was walking into a trap. But this time, I was the one holding the trigger. I looked around my townhouse. It was quiet. It was mine. I had built a life here that had nothing to do with them, and for the first time, I felt protective of it. I was not going back to Port Helmsley to seek their approval. I was going back to collect the evidence required to close the case file forever. "I am coming home," I whispered to the empty air. But I was not Everly the doormat anymore. I was Everly the architect, and I was about to dismantle the house they had built on my back. The house was staged for a performance. That was the first thought that struck me as I walked up the driveway. The windows were glowing with a warm, inviting amber light that suggested a sanctuary against the cold December wind. There was a wreath on the door, tasteful and dusted with artificial snow. Inside, the air smelled aggressively of cinnamon and roasted meat. A sensory overload designed to trigger nostalgia and lower defenses. It was the olfactory equivalent of a trapdoor covered with leaves. I rang the doorbell. I still had a key, of course, but using it implied a familiarity I no longer felt. I was a guest now, a guest who knew the host was poisoning the wine. My mother opened the door before the chime had even finished echoing. "Everly," she cried out, throwing her arms around me. The hug was tight. It was suffocating. In the past, Marla's hugs had been brief, distracted things. performed while she looked over my shoulder to see if the oven was smoking. Tonight, she held on. She pressed me against her cashmere sweater, rocking me slightly. It lasted 5 seconds too long. It was the kind of hug you give someone right before you ask them for a kidney. "I am so glad you are here," she whispered into my ear. Her voice trembled with a theatrical sort of relief. "We have missed you so much." I stood stiffly in her embrace, my arms pinned to my sides. "I missed you too, Mom." I lied. My voice was calm. It did not waver. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her eyes scanning my face. "You look tired, honey. Are you working too hard? You need to let us take care of you tonight. Just relax. We are all together now." I walked into the hallway. Delaney was there, leaning against the banister in a red velvet dress that looked festive and expensive. She pushed off the railing and came toward me, her face arranged in a bright, eager expression that did not quite reach her eyes. "Ev," she squealed, grabbing my hand. She did not hug me. She took my hand and squeezed it, stroking the back of my knuckles with her thumb. It was a gesture of intimacy that we had never shared growing up. It felt foreign, like a stranger petting a dog they were afraid might bite. "I am literally so happy you came. I was telling Mom, it is not Christmas without Everly." She did not let go of my hand. She led me into the living room as if I were a fragile invalid who needed guiding. The house was spotless. The clutter that usually accumulated on the side tables, the stacks of mail, the reading glasses, the remote controls had been swept away. Soft jazz was playing from the speakers. It was a set. They had dressed the stage perfectly for the play they were about to perform. My father, Grant, was standing by the fireplace, nursing a tumbler of amber liquid. He looked up and smiled, a broad, hearty expression that showed too many teeth. "There she is. The prodigal daughter returns," he boomed. "Hello, Dad," I said. He came over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was heavy. "Good to see you, kid. Truly. How was the flight? No delays." "It was smooth." I said, Good. Let me get you a drink. Wine? Or maybe something stronger. You look like you could use a stiff one." "Water is fine," I said. "Oh, come on. It is a celebration," Grant insisted, pouring me a glass of Pinot Noir anyway. He handed it to me, forcing me to take it. "We are celebrating family and survival, right? It has been a tough year for everyone." He clinked his glass against mine hard enough that I worried the crystal would shatter. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rims that were usually reserved for visits from the priest or the bank manager. I sat in my usual spot, but the dynamic was inverted. Usually, I was the listener, the one who nodded while Delaney recounted her social conquests. Tonight, all 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. "So, tell us about Seattle," Grant said, cutting into his roast beef. "How is the industry?" "I read an article the other day that said tech stocks are rallying again. Van Trellis must be printing money right now. It is a stable market," I said, picking at my potatoes. "Stable is good." Grant nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Stable is very good. And your position, you are still in management. Right overseeing the big accounts. I'm a systems architect. Dad, I manage the team." Right. That must come with a hefty bonus structure," he said. He tried to make it sound casual, but the greed was leaking out of his tone like oil from a cracked engine. "I mean, with the responsibility you have, they must compensate you well." I looked at him. He was not asking because he was proud. He was asking because he was calculating the yield of his investment. "They pay fair market value," I said. Delaney chimed in, reaching across the table to touch my arm again. Her fingers felt cold. "You are so modest. Ev, seriously, you are like a girl boss. I tell my friends all the time. My sister runs the internet. It is so inspiring." I looked at her. A month ago, she had told her friends I was easy to manipulate. "Thank you, Delaney," I said. The conversation continued like this for an hour. It was an interrogation disguised as a reunion. They asked about my house value. They asked about my stock options. They asked if I had considered investing in real estate in Port Helmsley. They circled the topic of money like sharks circling a raft, bumping against it to test its durability before attacking. Then came the gifts. In previous years, gift-giving was a source of anxiety for me. I would agonize over what to get them, only to receive polite, dismissive nods. This year, I had brought simple things: a scarf for Marla, a book for Grant, a candle for Delaney. They opened them with a voracious energy. "Oh, I love this color," Marla exclaimed, holding up the gray scarf as if it were spun gold. "It is so soft. Is this cashmere?" "It is wool blend," I said. "It is beautiful," she said, clutching it to her chest. "Thank you, honey. You always have such good taste." Delaney unwrapped the candle. It smelled of pine. She inhaled it deeply, closing her eyes. "This is amazing. I needed this. My apartment smells like stale takeout. You are the best." "Ev," there was no hesitation. There was no polite "you shouldn't have." They took the gifts with the entitlement of people receiving tribute. They did not ask if I had kept the receipts. They did not ask if I had spent too much. They simply absorbed my offerings into their black hole of need. After dessert, a pumpkin pie that Marla had bought from a bakery but claimed to have baked, my mother stood up. She wiped her hands on her napkin with a nervous, fluttering motion. "Why don't we move to the living room for coffee?" she suggested. Her voice was a little too high. "It is more comfortable and, well, there is something we wanted to talk to you about. A family matter." This was it. The trap was springing shut. I stood up. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm of a soldier who hears the click of a landmine and realizes there is no point in running. We walked into the living room. Grant sat in his armchair. Marla and Delaney sat on the sofa, leaving the single armchair opposite them for me. It was a classic intervention setup, 2 against 1, with the judge presiding. I sat down. I did not take the coffee Marla offered. I folded my hands in my lap. Grant cleared his throat. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Everly, look, we know we have been leaning on you a bit lately, and we appreciate it. We really do. We love you so much," Marla added, nodding vigorously. "But the thing is," Grant continued, ignoring her, "an opportunity has come up. A big one. Your Uncle Jerry knows a guy who is developing a new commercial complex downtown. Ground floor investment. It is a sure thing. Ev, guaranteed returns, but we need liquidity to get in." He paused. He licked his lips. "We were thinking, since you are doing so well, maybe we could pool our resources, make it a family trust. You put up the capital. We manage the investment, and we split the profits. It would set us all up for life. Delaney could finally quit that retail job. Your mother and I could retire properly." He looked at me with shining, predatory eyes. He was asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was asking for my life savings to fund a gamble. Delaney leaned forward. Her face twisted into a mask of hopeful innocence. It would be amazing. "Ev, we could build something together. Hayes family empire. Imagine that." I looked at them. I looked at the staged lighting. I looked at the fake snow on the wreath. I looked at the people who shared my DNA. I did not feel anger. I felt exhaustion. "I'm not going to do that, Dad," I said. The room went still. Grant's smile faltered. "What?" he asked. "I am not investing," I said, "and I am not giving you any more money." Marla laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. "Oh, honey, do not be like that. You have not even heard the details. It is not a gift. It is an investment. I do not need the details." I said. I looked at Delaney. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open. "I heard about the barbecue," I said. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was as if I had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Grant froze. Marla blinked rapidly. Delaney went pale beneath her makeup. "The barbecue," Marla stammered. "What? What barbecue?" "The one you had a month ago," I said. My voice was soft, level. "The one where you sat by the fire pit. The one where you talked about me." I turned my gaze to Delaney. Do you remember what you said? Delaney, I asked. Delaney's eyes darted to Grant, then back to me. She looked terrified. I do not know what you are talking about. You are being weird. Ev, I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I just kept looking at her. You said I was easy to steer. I said, you said I open my wallet whenever you send a text with an exclamation point. The color drained from her face completely. She looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. Marla gasped. She stood up, her hands fluttering. Everly, that is, you must have misunderstood. You know how rumors are. Who told you that? Was it one of the neighbors? People are so jealous of us. They make things up. Grant looked away. He stared at the television screen, which was turned off, reflecting the distorted image of our broken family. He took a long drink of his scotch. He did not deny it. He knew better. I did not misunderstand. I said, I heard the words. Useful. That is the word Dad used. Finally useful. Grant set his glass down. It made a sharp clack against the coaster. Now look here. Everly, you are taking things out of context. We were just venting. Families vent. It does not mean we do not love you. You are being dramatic. Dramatic. Delaney's fear turned into defensive anger. Tears welled up in her eyes. Tears of frustration, not remorse. You are always like this, she cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. You always have to be the victim, so what if we said some things? We are stressed. Do you have any idea how hard it is for us? You sit up there in your tower in Seattle with all your money, and you judge us. You have no idea. She was crying now, ugly, heaving sobs. It was a performance, but it was also real. It was the tantrum of a child who has been told the candy store is closed. I stood up. I did not shout back. I did not list the checks I had written. I did not remind them of the internet bills, the car repairs, the roof quotes. Marla reached for me. Everly, please, sit down. Let's talk about this. We can fix this. We are a family. I stepped back, out of her reach. I understand enough. I said, I looked at Grant, who still would not look at me. I looked at Marla, who was trembling. I looked at Delaney, who was wiping her eyes, waiting for me to apologize for upsetting her. I am done, I said. I walked to the hallway. I took my coat from the rack. My hands were steady as I buttoned it. I could hear Marla crying in the living room, a low, wailing sound that demanded comfort. I did not go back. I opened the front door. The cold night air hit my face, sharp and clean. It smelled of pine and rain, not cinnamon and lies. I stepped out onto the porch. Standing there, in the shadows of the overhang, was Opal. She was wearing a heavy wool coat and a hat pulled low over her ears. She was leaning on her cane, her breath pluming in the frosty air. She did not look surprised to see me. She looked like a general waiting for a soldier to return from a reconnaissance mission. She did not say a word. She just looked at me, her eyes dark and intelligent. She looked at the closed door behind me, then back at my face. She saw the lack of tears. She saw the set of my jaw. She nodded. One single, sharp nod. I walked past her, down the steps to where my rental car was parked. I did not look back at the house with its glowing windows. I did not look back at the stage where I had played the fool for 33 years. I got into the car. I started the engine. As I pulled away, I saw Opal turn and walk slowly toward the driveway, not toward the house. She was leaving too. I drove into the dark. The silence in the car was heavy. But it was not empty. It was full. It was full of the truth. And for the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. The aftermath of my departure was not an explosion. There were no screaming voicemails, no barrage of angry texts, no police cars rolling up to my townhouse in Seattle to perform a welfare check. The reaction was far more efficient and far colder. 3 hours after I drove away from the house in Port Helmsley, I received a single notification on my phone. You have been removed from Hayes Fam Bam 2.0. That was it. I had been deleted. It was a digital exile, a silent confirmation that without the subscription fee of my salary, my membership had been revoked. For the next 2 months, I lived in a state of strange, weightless vertigo. It was the feeling of stepping off a treadmill that had been running at high speed for decades. My brain, accustomed to the constant background processing of their demands, calculating their bills, anticipating their crises, managing their emotions, suddenly had nothing to do. I threw myself into my work at Ventrellis. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family estrangement. I began to sleep for 7 hours a night. I started to believe that it was over. I thought the worst they could do was badmouth me to the neighbors, or tell the extended family I was ungrateful. I thought the silence was a truce. I was wrong. The silence was not a truce. It was development time. It began on a Thursday morning in late February. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the code for a new encryption protocol. When my desk phone rang, this was unusual. My cell phone was for personal contacts, but my desk line was reserved for internal company business or high-level external partners. I picked it up. "This is Everly Hayes." "Good morning, Ms. Hayes," a man's voice said. It was smooth, confident, the kind of voice that belongs to someone wearing a $3,000 suit. "This is Marcus Sterling from Sterling Venture Partners in San Francisco." I paused. I knew the firm. They were serious players in the tech investment space. "Hello, Mr. Sterling. How can I help you? I wanted to reach out personally regarding the pitch deck we received last week," he said. "We are quite intrigued by the proprietary security framework you are proposing under the new consultancy. We have been looking for a partner with your specific background at Ventrellis to audit a few of our portfolio companies." My fingers froze over my keyboard. "I am sorry," I said, keeping my voice level. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. I have not sent you a pitch deck. I work exclusively for Ventrellis Cyberworks. I do not have an independent consultancy." There was a pause on the line. The sound of shuffling papers. "That is strange, Mr. Sterling said, his tone shifting from cordial to confused. "I am looking right at the prospectus for Hayes Harbor Advisory. It lists you as the managing partner and co-founder. It outlines your entire employment history, your security clearances, and claims you are the lead architect for their enterprise solutions." My stomach dropped. It felt as if the floor had dissolved beneath my chair. "Hayes Harbor Advisory," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "The website is quite impressive. It says you are currently accepting clients for Q3. "Mr. Sterling," I said, and I could hear the steel entering my voice. "I need to ask you a favor. Can you give me the URL of that website?" "Of course," he said, sounding wary now. "It is www.hayesharboradvisory.com. I typed it in. I hit enter. The screen loaded, and I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not an amateur blog. It was a sleek, professional corporate landing page. The design was minimalist and expensive navy blue and slate gray. Stock photos of glass skyscrapers and people shaking hands in boardrooms scrolled across the banner, and there, right in the center of the Our Leadership section, was my face. It was a professional headshot I had taken for a Ventrellis press release 2 years ago. Underneath it, in bold sans-serif font, it read, "Everly Hayes, Managing Partner, Chief Technology Officer." I scrolled down. My bio was there. Not just a summary, but my actual resume. They had listed my degrees, my certifications, and my specific role in confidential projects I had managed at Ventrellis. But it got worse. Next to my face was a photo of my father, Grant. He was wearing a suit I had never seen him wear, looking stern and executive. Grant Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, and below him, Delaney. She looked like a model in a stock photo, smiling radiantly. Delaney Hayes, Director of Client Relations. I scrolled further. There were testimonials. Fake quotes from non-existent CEOs praising the integrity and security solutions provided by the Hayes family. Everly and her team saved our infrastructure, the best in the business. John Doe, CEO of Tech Global. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of my desk. This was not just a lie. This was fraud. This was corporate impersonation. They were using my name, my credentials, and my actual employer's reputation to solicit millions of dollars in investment capital. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. That website is a fabrication. I am not associated with that entity. I did not authorize the use of my name or my likeness. I advise you not to engage with them. I see. Mr. Sterling said. His voice was ice cold now. Thank you for the information. Ms. Hayes, we will be flagging this internally. He hung up. I sat there, staring at the screen. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was dangerous. If Ventrellis found out I was seemingly running a side business using their proprietary knowledge, I would be fired. I could be sued. I could lose my security clearance. They were not just spending my money anymore. They were gambling with my entire existence. I looked at the top of the website. There was a Contact Us button. It listed a 1-800 number. I picked up my cell phone. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Thank you for calling Hayes Harbor Advisory, a premier security consulting firm. A voice answered. It was not a recording, and it was not a receptionist. It was my father. He was using his business voice, a deep, affected baritone that he used when he was trying to impress a waiter or a car salesman. Dad, I said. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. The bravado evaporated instantly. Everly, he said. His voice dropped to its normal pitch, but there was a tremor in it. What have you done? I asked. I did not scream. I was too horrified to scream. Now, hold on, he stammered. Hold on a minute. You found the site. It looks good, doesn't it? We hired a top developer. Cost a pretty penny, but you have to spend money to make money, right? Take it down, I said. Take it down right now. Everly, be reasonable, he said, his voice taking on a whining, persuasive tone. We are not hurting anyone. We are just leveraging the assets. You have the name. You have the resume. We are just building a front end. I handle the business side. Delaney handles the talking. And you? Well, you are the hook. I am not a hook. Dad, I hissed, I am a person, and this is fraud. You are impersonating a business partner. You are using my security credentials to sell a service you cannot provide. Do you have any idea what happens if my company sees this? Oh, relax, he scoffed. It is just a pitch. We get the investment money first. Then we figure out the delivery. That is how business works. Ev, you fake it until you make it. We are doing this for the family. This is the legacy. You are stealing my identity. I said, I am your father, he shouted, losing his temper. I gave you that identity. I gave you that name. You owe us this. You walked out on us. You cut us off. We had to do something. We have bills. Everly, we have a standard of living. I felt the room spinning. He truly believed it. He truly believed he had the right to harvest my reputation like a crop he had planted. Put Delaney on the phone, I said. She is busy with a client. He said, there are no clients. Dad, it is a scam. Put her on. I heard a fumbling sound, then a muffled argument. A moment later, Delaney's voice came on the line. She sounded breathless, frantic. Ev. Look, do not freak out. You put my face on a website. Delaney, I said, you listed me as a managing partner. We needed credibility, she cried. Nobody listens to us. Nobody takes Grant seriously. But when they see your name, when they see Ventrellis, they listen. We just need to close one deal. Ev, just one. Then we can pay everyone back. We can hire real people. We can make it real. You are lying to investors. I said, we are selling a dream, she screamed. That is what you do. That is all you do. You sell safety. We are just selling the idea of you. Why do you have to be so selfish? Why do you have to ruin everything? I closed my eyes. Selfish. They were committing a felony, and I was the selfish one for noticing. How many people have you called? I asked. How many pitch decks have you sent out? I do not know. A few dozen, she said, her voice wavering. We have a meeting next week with a local angel investor. He is really interested. Ev, he's talking about a 6-figure seed round. Please, just let us have this. Just stay quiet for 2 weeks. That is all I ask. Stay quiet. That was their strategy. They banked on my silence. They banked on the fact that I had spent 33 years being the background noise, the fixer, the one who absorbed the mess so they could shine. They thought I would be too afraid of the scandal to expose them. They thought I would protect them to protect myself. You are going to jail. Delaney, I said softly. Don't you dare, she hissed. If you report us, you go down too. Your name is all over this. You think your company will believe you didn't know you are the managing partner. You are complicit. It was a threat, a clumsy, desperate threat, but a threat nonetheless. I looked at the website on my screen. I looked at my own smiling face, distorted by their greed. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my office. The hum of the servers in the room next door sounded like a heartbeat. I realized then that the tragedy was not that they did not love me. The tragedy was that they had underestimated me. They thought I was just a source of money. They forgot what I actually did for a living. I was a systems architect. I specialized in identifying threats, isolating compromised nodes, and neutralizing them. I picked up my mouse. I did not call my parents back. I did not call the police, not yet. I opened a new email window. I typed in the address of the General Counsel at Ventrellis Cyberworks. Subject urgent. Unauthorized use of corporate identity/external fraud report. They wanted to use my name fine. I would make sure my name was the last thing they ever wanted to hear. I was not the victim of a family drama anymore. I was the lead witness in a federal investigation, and I was about to burn the Hayes Harbor Advisory to the ground before they could cash a single check. The transition from daughter to plaintiff is not a sudden leap. It is a slow, agonizing crawl through a field of broken glass. But once you reach the other side, the pain turns into a cold, hard clarity. I did not cry after I hung up the phone with my sister. I did not throw a vase against the wall. I did exactly what I would do if a hostile actor had compromised a server at Ventrellis. I engaged the incident response protocol. The first step was containment. I hired Julian Thorne the next morning. Julian was not a family law attorney. He was a shark in a bespoke suit who specialized in intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. His office was in a glass tower that looked down on the city, and he listened to my story with the dispassionate focus of a surgeon assessing a tumor. So, let me get this straight, Julian said, steepling his fingers. They have misappropriated your name, your likeness, and your professional credentials to solicit venture capital for a shell company that has no assets, no employees, and no product. Correct, I said, and they have threatened that if you expose them, you will be implicated as a co-conspirator. He added, Yes. Julian let out a short, dry laugh. It was the first time I had felt safe in weeks. That is adorable, he said. It is also extortion. We are going to bury them, Everly. But we have to move fast. If they take a single dollar from an investor, this moves from civil liability to federal wire fraud. We drafted the cease and desist order within the hour. It was not a polite request. It was a legal grenade. It demanded the immediate removal of the website, the destruction of all marketing materials, and a full accounting of any funds already solicited. We sent it via courier to my parents' house in Port Helmsley, requiring a signature upon delivery. I imagined the look on my father's face when he had to sign for his own destruction. Then, I went dark. I treated my own life like a compromised network. I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus and froze my files. I set up fraud alerts that would trigger if anyone so much as sneezed in the direction of my social security number. I changed every password I owned, implementing hardware-based 2-factor authentication keys. I bought a new phone with a new number and ported my old number to a cloud service that automatically recorded all incoming calls. My family had relied on my apathy. They were about to encounter my architecture. The hardest part was the meeting at Ventrellis. Walking into the office of our general counsel, a woman named Reynolds, who had the warmth of a glacier, was terrifying. I was effectively walking in to tell my boss that my face was being used to run a scam. I laid it all out, the website screenshots, the transcripts of the calls, the cease and desist letter. I held nothing back. Ms. Hayes, Reynolds said, looking over her glasses. "You understand that if we had discovered this on our own, we would have terminated you immediately." "I know," I said, keeping my hands folded on my lap to hide the shaking. "That is why I am bringing it to you. I am the victim of identity theft. I am taking legal action to shut it down. I value my position here, and I wanted to get ahead of the narrative." She looked at the documents again. She looked at the fake bio of Delaney. She looked at the fraudulent claims about Ventrellis. She closed the file. "We will support you," she said. "In fact, our trademark team will be sending their own letter regarding the unauthorized use of the Ventrellis logo. It carries a little more weight than a personal cease and desist." I breathed for the first time in 20 minutes, but the clock was ticking. The website was still up, and I knew my father. He was stubborn. He would think the lawyer's letter was a bluff. He would think I was just trying to scare him. He would try to close a deal before the walls came down. 2 days later, my vigilance paid off. I had set up a listening algorithm to scan industry forums and investment boards for mentions of Hayes Harbor. It pinged on a Tuesday afternoon. A post on a local angel investor network in the Pacific Northwest mentioned a promising security startup seeking seed funding, with a meeting scheduled for Thursday. I did some digging. The poster was an associate of a man named Arthur Vance, a retired software tycoon who liked to fund local projects. I called Arthur Vance directly. "Mr. Vance," I said when he answered, "you do not know me, but I believe you are about to make a transfer of $50,000 to a firm called Hayes Harbor Advisory." "Who is this?" he asked, sounding annoyed. "This is Everly Hayes," I said, "the person listed as the managing partner on the deck you are holding." There was a silence. "I am calling to inform you that I am not a partner." I continued, "I am not a founder. I have never met the people pitching you, other than the fact that they are my estranged relatives. There is no algorithm. There is no team. If you transfer that money, you are throwing it into a furnace." He asked me 3 questions to verify my identity. I answered them with technical specifics that only the real architect would know. "My God," he whispered, "I have the wire instructions right here on my desk. I was going to send it this afternoon." "Do not send it," I said, "and do not tell them I called. Just tell them your due diligence found some irregularities. I saved his money. I saved my reputation." But the rage inside me was beginning to curdle into something colder. They had been hours away, literal hours, from stealing $50,000 using my face. I needed to know how they were doing it. My father could barely convert a Word document to a PDF. Delaney used her laptop primarily for shopping. Neither of them had the technical skill to build a site that looked that professional, or to set up the encrypted email servers they were using. I went hunting. I pulled the WHOI's data for the domain. It was privacy protected, of course, but every digital action leaves a fingerprint. I analyzed the source code of the website. I looked at the metadata on the stock images. I traced the hosting provider to a server farm in Oregon. I found a breadcrumb in the SSL certificate registration. It was linked to an email address that was not my father's or Delaney's. Brandon. K. _design. theorygmail.com. I ran the handle. ... It led me to a LinkedIn profile for a guy named Brandon Kyle. ... He was a freelance web designer based in Port Helmsley. ... I scrolled through his connections, and there she was, Delaney Hayes. I dug deeper. I found Brandon's Venmo history, which he had foolishly left public. 3 weeks ago, he had received a payment of $2,000 from Delaney Hayes with the caption, "Website Magic," but it was the next discovery that stopped my heart. In my credit monitoring sweep, I had noticed a soft pull, a credit inquiry that doesn't impact your score from a small lending institution called Quick Capital. It had happened a month ago, right around the time the website went live. I had assumed it was a glitch, but now, with my lawyer's help, I requested the documentation associated with the inquiry. Julian called me into his office the next day. He looked grim. "We got the file from Quick Capital," he said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It was a loan application for $20,000, a short-term business bridge loan. The applicant was Hayes Harbor Advisory. The guarantor was Everly Hayes. And at the bottom of the page, in blue ink, was my signature. I stared at it. It was a decent forgery. It had the loop in the E that I used to do in high school. A style I had abandoned years ago, but which my family would remember. "This is not my signature," I said quietly. "I know," Julian said. "But the money was dispersed. They got the 20 grand. They used it to pay Brandon, to pay for the hosting, to buy the suits they are wearing in the photos. They forged my signature to get a loan." I said, "That is bank fraud. That is identity theft. That is a felony." Julian nodded. "If we take this to the police, Everly, they go to prison, not for a weekend, for years." I looked at the signature again. I thought about the barbecue. I thought about the word useful. They had not just stolen my money. They had stolen my name to enslave me to a debt I did not authorize. They had legally shackled me to their lie. I was about to tell Julian to call the police when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Grandma Opal. She had been my silent operative inside the house. I had asked her not to intervene, just to observe. "Check your mail." The text read, "I sent you a package. Found something in the trash." I drove home. The package was waiting on my doorstep. It was a manila envelope, taped shut with excessive care. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper that had been smoothed out. It was a printout of an email chain between Grant and Brandon, the web designer. "Grant, make sure the bio emphasizes her work at Ventralis. That is the selling point. If anyone asks to speak to her, tell them she is traveling for a secure contract and cannot take calls. We just need the site to look legit enough to get the first round of funding. Brandon, are you sure she's okay with this? I mean, putting her face on the front page." "Grant, she's fine with it. She is silent partner. She knows her role. Just do it." And clipped to the email was a handwritten note on a sticky pad in Delaney's handwriting, "Note to self. Delete Ev's number from the reference list before sending to investors. Give them my burner number instead." It was categorical proof of intent. They knew I had not consented. They were actively conspiring to block me from the process while using my identity as the bait. I sat at my kitchen island. The evidence spread out before me like an autopsy of my family's morality. I had the forgery. I had the email trail. I had the witness. I could send them to jail today. I could press the button and watch the police cars roll up to the driveway in Port Helmsley. But that was too easy. That was too quick. If I arrested them now, they would play the victim. They would cry to the extended family that I was a vindictive monster who put her own parents in handcuffs over a misunderstanding. They would spin it. They would say they intended to pay the loan back. They would say they were just trying to survive. I did not want them to be victims. I wanted them to be exposed. I called Julian back. "Do not file the police report yet." I said, "Everly," he warned, "you are playing with fire. If they default on that loan, the creditors come after you." "I know," I said, "but I have an idea. I do not just want to stop them. I want to clear the board." "What are you planning?" Julian asked. "They are planning a launch party." I said, "I saw it in the email Opal sent. They are calling it a family comeback event. They are inviting everyone, the investors, the neighbors, the relatives. Yes, I'm going to go." I said, "Everly, no, I am going to go." I repeated, "And I'm going to bring the truth with me. I do not want to argue with them in private. Julian, I want the people they are lying to see exactly who they are. I want the investors to see the forgery. I want the neighbors to see the fraud." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear Julian thinking. "If you do this," he said slowly, "you have to be perfect. You have to be calm. You cannot lose your temper. You have to walk in there, drop the evidence, and walk out. It has to be a surgical strike. I am a systems architect, Julian." I said, "Surgical strikes are my job." I hung up. I looked at the forged signature one last time. It looked pathetic now. It looked like the desperate scratching of people who were drowning and trying to climb on top of me to breathe. They thought I was background noise. They thought I was the static that hummed while they lived their lives in Technicolor. They forgot that I am the one who controls the signal. They forgot that before you can build a new system, you have to purge the corrupted data. I picked up a pen and wrote a date on my calendar, the date of their party. It was not a reunion, it was a court date. And I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, gray and nondescript, sitting atop a pile of junk mail and utility bills. It had no return address. The handwriting, however, was as familiar to me as my own signature. It was my mother's script looping, decorative, and frantic, the pen pressing hard enough to indent the paper. I did not open it immediately. I carried it into the kitchen and placed it on the granite countertop. I made a cup of tea. I watched the steam rise, counting backwards from 10, regulating my heart rate. In my line of work, you never open a suspicious file without first isolating it in a sandbox environment. My kitchen was the sandbox. When I finally slit the envelope open, two things fell out: a single sheet of lined notebook paper and a photograph. I picked up the letter first. "My dearest Everly," it began. I flinched. The endearment felt like a weapon. "I know you are angry. I know you think we have done something terrible. But I need you to understand that everything we do for this family. We were drowning. Ev, your father was so scared about the future. Delaney was losing hope. We saw a way out. And yes, maybe we borrowed your name for a little while. But is that such a crime? We gave you that name. We raised you. We supported you when you were nothing." I paused, reading that line again. When you were nothing, we did not want to bother you with the details because we know how busy you are with your important job. We wanted to surprise you. We wanted to present you with a success story, not a burden. We wanted you to be proud of us for once. Please, honey, call us. Call the lawyers off. Do not destroy your own flesh and blood over a misunderstanding. We love you more than anything. Love, Mom. There was no apology, not a real one. There was no, "I am sorry we forged your signature." There was no, "I am sorry we stole your identity." There was only justification. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, framing their crime as a desperate act of love and my boundaries as an act of cruelty. I put the letter down. My hand was shaking, not with sadness, but with a cold, vibrating rage. Then, I picked up the photograph. It was an old 4x6 print. The colors faded to a warm, nostalgic sepia. It must have been taken 25 years ago. It was a candid shot of the living room in our old house. In the background, my father was sitting on the sofa, laughing at something on the television. My mother was next to him, holding a glass of wine, her head thrown back in amusement. Delaney, a toddler then, was playing with a pile of bright plastic blocks on the rug, clapping her hands. And there, in the foreground, tucked away in the corner of the frame, was me. I was perhaps 8 years old. I was not playing. I was not watching television. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor. My brow furrowed in intense concentration. In my small hands, I held a broken portable radio. I had a screwdriver one I must have taken from my father's toolbox without asking, and the back of the radio was open. I was fixing it. I remembered that radio. My father had been ready to throw it out because the dial was stuck. I had fished it out of the trash. I spent 3 hours realigning the internal mechanism. When I finally got it to work, when static turned into music, I ran to show them. My father had just taken it from my hands, nodded absently, and put it back on the shelf. He never asked how I did it. He just accepted that it worked. I looked at the photo. The contrast was brutal. They were the consumers of joy. I was the maintenance crew. For 33 years, I had thought I was excluded because I was boring. I thought I was ignored because I lacked Delaney's sparkle. I was wrong. I wasn't excluded. I was employed. I was the mechanic. I was the fixer. I was the one who kept the lights on, the Wi-Fi running, and the silence comfortable so they could perform their lives. And now that I had money, they had simply promoted me. I was no longer just the mechanic. I was the bank. I was the venture capital. I was the raw material they were mining to build their facade. They did not want me in the picture. They wanted me behind the camera. Or better yet, paying for the film. My phone rang. It was Opal. I picked it up on the first ring. Did you get the mail, she asked. No greeting? No preamble? I got it. I said. My voice was thick. Your mother called me yesterday. Opal said. She was crying. She told me you had gone crazy. She said you were threatening to put your father in prison over a paperwork error. A paperwork error, I repeated. They forged my signature on a loan application. Grandma, they stole $20,000 in my name. I know, Opal said. Her voice was steel. I know exactly what they are, and it is time you knew something too. I sat down on the kitchen stool, still holding the photo of my 8-year-old self. What do you mean, 10 years ago? Opal said. When you were graduating from college, I went to see a lawyer. I wanted to update my will. I have some assets. Everly, not millions, but enough. I own the land the Coastal Club sits on. I have a portfolio. I did not know that. I said, nobody does. She said, I keep my mouth shut. But I wanted to set up a trust for you. I wanted to give you a nest egg so you could start your life without debt. I called a family meeting with your parents to discuss it. I waited. The silence on the line was heavy. Marla lost her mind. Opal continued. She told me that giving you money was a waste. She said you were the smart one, the independent one, that you would always land on your feet. She said Delaney was the one who needed help. She said Delaney was fragile, creative, that the world would eat her alive if she didn't have a cushion. I closed my eyes. Of course, Marla strongly suggested that I switch the beneficiary. Opal said, she wanted me to put the bulk of the estate in a trust for Delaney. With your parents as the trustees until she turned 30, she said you would not even mind. She said you would want it that way. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. They had been rewriting my consent for a decade. So you changed it, I asked. Opal made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. I told them I did. I told them they were right. I told them I would draft the papers exactly as they wanted. I froze. So Delaney gets everything? No, Opal said. I lied to them. Everly. I wanted to see what they would do if they thought the safety net was secured. I wanted to see if they would treat you better if they thought you were disinherited. And they treated you like furniture, she said violently. They treated you like a spare part. So the trust is in your name. Opal said, it always has been. But there is a clause I added 5 years ago, when I started noticing how Grant was looking at your career. What clause, I asked. I called it the Parasite Protocol. Opal said, my lawyer thought the name was too aggressive. But I insisted, the trust is dormant. Everly. But it has a trigger condition. If any member of the Hayes family is found to have committed financial fraud, identity theft, or extortion against the primary beneficiary, that is you, the entire estate is immediately locked. Your parents get nothing. Delaney gets nothing. The funds are diverted to a charity of your choice, and you are granted sole executorship of the remaining assets to cover your legal fees. I stared at the phone. My grandmother, the octogenarian who claimed to hate technology, had programmed a dead man's switch into her will. You knew, I whispered. You knew they would do this. I hoped they wouldn't. Opal said softly. I hoped I was just a cynical old woman. But I saw the way Marla looked at you when you got your first promotion. She didn't look proud. She looked hungry. I built the wall. Everly. I just waited for them to run into it. And they just did. I said, they did. She agreed. The loan they took out. The one with your forged signature. That is the trigger. As soon as you prove that fraud, the trust activates. They lose everything. Not just your money, but the inheritance they have been banking on for 20 years. I felt a rush of affection for her so strong it made my chest ache. She had been protecting me from the shadows. She had been the only one watching the mechanic in the corner while everyone else watched the television. Thank you, Grandma. I said, don't thank me yet, she said. The war is not over. Delaney is mobilizing. Have you seen her social media today? No. I said, I have been avoiding it. Look at it, she said, and then call your lawyer. We hung up. I opened my laptop. I logged into a burner account I used for monitoring. I navigated to Delaney's Instagram page. She had posted a photo an hour ago. It was a black and white selfie, looking teary-eyed and brave, staring out a window. The caption read, "It is crazy how money changes people. You think you know someone, you think you share the same values, the same blood, but then they get a little bit of success, and suddenly you are not good enough for them. They cut you off. They threaten you." It breaks my heart to realize that some people care more about their bank balance than their own family, trying to stay positive and build my own path, even when the people who are supposed to support you turn into your biggest enemies. Family trauma, toxic, success. Moving on. The comments were already flooding in. "Oh my God, is this about your sister? Stay strong. Babe, you do not need that negativity. Success reveals true colors. Karma will get her. We are here for you." Delaney. She was doing it. She was rewriting the narrative. She was painting herself as the victim of a greedy, heartless sister who had abandoned the family. She was preparing the ground. When the news of the lawsuit broke, when the website was taken down, she would spin it as me trying to sabotage her out of spite. She was weaponizing the public's sympathy. She was banking on the fact that the world loves a crying pretty girl more than it loves a quiet, successful woman. I read the comments. I read the lies. In the past, this would have destroyed me. I would have called her, begging her to take it down. I would have apologized for whatever imagined slight I had committed, just to stop the public humiliation. But I looked at the photo of the little girl with the screwdriver. That little girl had fixed the radio. She had taken a broken signal and made it clear. I was not going to beg. I was not going to argue in the comments section. I printed a screenshot of the post. I printed the comments. I took the handwritten letter from my mother. I took the sepia photograph. I walked over to a metal fireproof box I kept on my bookshelf. I unlocked it. Inside were the cease and desist letter, the loan documents from Quick Capital, the email transcripts Opal had sent me, and the recording of the phone call with Arthur Vance. I placed the new items inside. I was not keeping them for sentimental reasons. I was not keeping them to cry over on rainy nights. I was building a repository. Delaney was telling a story. She was writing a drama where she was the heroine. I was compiling a case file. I looked at the box. It was almost full. There was only one thing left to add, the climax. I picked up my phone and texted Julian, my lawyer. They are escalating. I wrote, "Delaney is controlling the narrative online." Julian replied instantly, "Do you want to send a defamation notice? No." I typed, "Let her talk. Let her dig the hole deeper. The more she claims to be the victim, the harder she falls when we show the evidence." "Are you still going to the party?" he asked. "Yes." I wrote, "I will be there." I closed the box. The lock clicked with a satisfying snap. They thought they were fighting a family feud. They thought this was about feelings, about guilt, about who called whom on Christmas. They did not realize they were fighting a forensic audit. I looked at the little girl in the photo one last time before the lid closed. "You fixed the radio," I told her silently. "Now I am going to fix the signal." I turned off the lights in the kitchen. The darkness was not scary. It was tactical. I was ready for the final act. The Harbor Light Community Hall was dressed up to look like a ballroom, but underneath the rented chandeliers and the heavy velvet drapes, you could still smell the floor wax and old coffee of a municipal building. My sister and parents had done their best to mask the reality. Just as they had done with their lives, there were gold balloons, a string quartet playing in the corner, and a large banner draped across the stage that read, "Strategic Partners, Investing in Tomorrow." They had changed the name. It was a clumsy, panicked pivot, a reaction to the cease and desist letter I had sent a week prior. They thought that by swapping Hayes Harbor Advisory for Strategic Partners, they had outsmarted the legal system. They thought they had scrubbed the fingerprints off the crime scene just by changing the sign on the door. I stood at the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of the entryway. To my left stood Julian Thorne, my lawyer, looking sharp and terrifying in his charcoal suit. To my right stood Grandma Opal, leaning on her cane, her posture as rigid as a steel beam. We watched the performance. Grant was on stage, holding a microphone. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the chest, sweating under the spotlights. He was in his element. Or at least, the element he pretended to inhabit. He was selling. "We are so glad you could all join us for this launch," Grant boomed, his voice echoing slightly. "This family has always believed in resilience. We believe in building legacy, and with the proprietary technology developed by our founding team, we are ready to offer you a level of security that is unprecedented in the market." He gestured to the side of the stage. Delaney walked out. She was wearing a shimmering silver gown, looking every inch the tech heiress she was pretending to be. She smiled, waved, and took the microphone. "My sister, Everly, could not be here tonight." She lied effortlessly. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "She is currently in Tokyo securing a major contract for our firm, but she sends her love, and she wants you to know that your investments are in the safest hands possible." The crowd applauded. I saw neighbors I had known since childhood. I saw local business owners. I saw a few unfamiliar faces in expensive suits, the angel investors they were trying to hook. I felt Julian touch my elbow. "It is time," he said softly. I did not storm the aisle. I did not scream. I walked forward with the steady, rhythmic pace of a metronome. The click of my heels on the hardwood floor cut through the applause. Julian and Opal flanked me, a phalanx of truth marching into a castle made of clouds. Grant saw me first. The smile slid off his face like wet paint. He lowered the microphone, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Delaney turned, following his gaze. When she saw me, she took a literal step back, nearly tripping over the hem of her gown. The room sensed the shift in energy. The applause died down, replaced by a confused murmuring. The string quartet stopped playing. "Everly," Grant said. His voice was audible over the speakers. A breathless, panicked squeak. "You made it back. From Tokyo." He was trying to improvise. He was trying to weave my presence into his lie. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I did not take the microphone from him. I stood in front of it, looking out at the room. I looked at the investors in the front row. I looked at the neighbors. "I have never been to Tokyo." I said, my voice projected clearly, calm and cold. Grant laughed nervously. He reached for my arm. "Oh, honey, you are jet-lagged. Let's go backstage and get you some water." I pulled my arm away. I turned to Julian. Julian stepped forward. He placed a leather briefcase on the podium. The sound of the latches clicking open was loud in the silent room. He pulled out a stack of documents, thick and bound with legal clips. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said. His voice was a rich baritone that commanded absolute attention. "My name is Julian Thorne. I am the legal representative for Ms. Everly Hayes. I am here to serve a formal notice of fraud against the entity known as H Strategic Partners, formerly Hayes Harbor Advisory." A gasp went through the room. Grant lunged forward. "You cannot do this. This is a private event. Security." "There is no security." "Dad," I said, "just like there is no company." Delaney rushed to the front of the stage. Her face flushed. "She is lying. She is jealous. She is trying to ruin us because we cut her out of the deal." Julian ignored her. He held up a document. "We have evidence here of identity theft, trademark infringement, and bank fraud," he announced. Turning to the investors, "This document is a loan application submitted to Quick Capital for $20,000. It bears a signature purporting to be that of Everly Hayes. Forensic handwriting analysis has confirmed this signature is a forgery." He held up another paper. "This is an email transcript from Mr. Grant Hayes instructing a web developer to use my client's professional credentials without her consent to solicit funds." He looked directly at the angel investors in the front row. "If you have written a check to this entity, you have not invested in a security firm. You have donated to a personal expense fund for 2 individuals who are currently unemployed." The room erupted. People stood up. Chairs scraped against the floor. The local business owners began shouting questions. Grant was shaking. He looked at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. "How could you?" he whispered. "We are your family. We were doing this for all of us. I looked at him. I felt nothing. The man who had called me useful was now looking at me to save him. But I was out of tools. Then, the first twist landed. One of the investors in the front row, a man with gray hair and a stern face, stood up. It was Arthur Vance, the man I had called. I knew. He looked at Grant with disgust. Ms. Hayes contacted me last week. I came here tonight because I wanted to see if you had the audacity to go through with it. I have the police on the line outside. Grant grabbed the podium to steady himself. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. Police Marla shrieked from the side of the stage. She ran out, her hands fluttering like distressed birds. No police. It is a misunderstanding. It is just a family dispute. Everly, tell them to stop. She grabbed my hands. Her palms were clammy. Everly, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. We are your parents. We raised you. You cannot send your father to jail. Think about the legacy. Think about what people will say. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had suggested disinheriting me because I was too strong to need help. Then, Grandma Opal stepped up to the microphone. She did not look frail tonight. She looked like a judge. There is no legacy. Marla, Opal said into the mic. Marla froze. Mother, what are you doing? I am doing what I should have done 20 years ago, Opal said. She looked out at the crowd, then turned to her daughter. You were banking on the inheritance, weren't you? You told Grant that even if the business failed, you would eventually get the land and the trust when I died. Marla went pale. I activated the parasite protocol this morning, Opal announced. The room went deadly silent. Even the angry investors stopped shouting to listen. The trust I set up had a condition, Opal said, her voice ringing out. If any member of this family attempted to defraud the primary beneficiary, Everly, the assets would be immediately frozen and redirected. Redirected, Grant croaked. Redirected where? To the scholarship fund for women in technology. Opal said, every dime, the land, the stocks, the savings, it is all gone. Grant, you have nothing, and Everly is the sole executor of the transfer. Delaney let out a scream. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. You witch, she shrieked, pointing at Opal, then whirling on me. You did this. You planned this. You wanted to steal everything for yourself. She lunged at me. It was a clumsy, desperate attack. She grabbed the lapel of my blazer, her nails digging into the fabric. You selfish, ugly, boring, little nothing, she screamed, shaking me. I hate you. I have always hated you. You think you are better than us. You are nothing without us. We made you. I stood still. I did not push her back. I let the room see her. I let the investors see the director of client relations screaming like a banshee. I let the neighbors see the perfect daughter unmasked. I let the facade crumble completely. Julian stepped forward and gently removed her hands from my jacket. She stumbled back, panting, her hair wild, her eyes manic. Marla was sobbing on the floor, clutching Grant's leg. Grant was staring into the middle distance, a broken man who realized the math finally did not add up. The police sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer. Everly, Marla wailed. How can you do this? We are family. I looked down at her. I looked at the wreckage of the stage. I picked up the microphone one last time. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gavel falling. Family is not where people gut each other to survive. I put the microphone down. It made a dull thud. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs. I walked past the stunned investors. I walked past the neighbors who were whispering behind their hands. Everly Delaney screamed after me. Come back here. Fix this. You have to fix this. I kept walking. I walked out of the double doors of the Harbor Light Community Hall. The night air was cold and biting. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers were reflecting off the wet pavement, painting the world in jagged bursts of color. I saw the officers walking toward the entrance. I stepped aside to let them pass. I got into my rental car. Julian and Opal got in with me. We did not speak for a long time. We just drove. We drove away from the noise, away from the sirens, away from the collapsing star that was the Hayes family. I dropped Opal off at her cottage. She squeezed my hand before she got out. "You did good," she said. "You stood tall. Thank you." "Opal," I said. I drove to the airport. I caught the red-eye back to Seattle. When I landed, the sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains. The city was gray and silver, washed clean by the rain. I took a cab to my townhouse. I walked inside. It was quiet, but for the first time, the silence did not feel empty. It did not feel like a void waiting to be filled by their demands. It felt like space. It felt like room to breathe. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket. It was a text from Opal. "Con kom con la ting on nen nua. You are no longer background noise." I walked to the window. I looked out at the Puget Sound, at the ferries cutting through the dark water, creating wakes that spread out and eventually disappeared. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the cold, damp air of my own life. I was not a daughter. I was not a sister. I was not a fixer. I was Everly. And for the first time, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to Everly's story. It was a journey of finding a voice in the silence, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment below and let's chat. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this video can reach more people who need to hear that it is okay to walk away from toxic family. See you in the next story.